Hello and welcome to the Inside Stylist podcast, where we talk all about interiors with interviews with interior stylists, writers and the fabulous homeware brands that make a house a home. I also catch up with industry experts in the know and get them to share all their knowledge and advice. There's so much to talk about. I'm your host, Emma Morton-Turner, an interior stylist and writer with a ton of experience. I set up InsideStylist.com so I can share all that interiors love with you. So don't forget to head on over to the website for not only the show notes from today's episode, but regular interior blog posts and a whole host of inspiration on the interior stylists and writers' profiles. But for now, enjoy the show. Hello. This episode is going to be all about the new TV show, Interior Design Masters. So if you're listening to this, the chances are you've probably seen the programme. It started last Wednesday and it was on 8 o'clock on BBC Two. I think I watched it on iPlayer on catch up because I was on holiday when it first aired, and driving home, we were in Cornwall, we could only pick up Radio 2 and it felt like every other advert was for Interior Design Masters. So I kind of got to thinking this would be quite an interesting topic of conversation for the podcast today. I do love an interior show. I don't watch them all because it's a bit of a busman's holiday. I don't know if other interior stylists find that. It's always fascinating to watch shows when you know someone. I do know one of the contestants, not very well, just through Inside Stylists. But it's also really lovely to see all the crazy ideas that people come up with. And I kind of got to thinking, I felt like the way I started this episode was all about the advice I would give someone who was on a show. But I've never been on a show. I don't know the pressures, the stress, the timings. I don't know any of the behind the scenes stuff that really goes on. So I'm kind of taking this episode as a bit of a, if I was to be asked for advice in their situation, I would give these 10 pieces of styling advice, or how to up your interior styling game. And it's literally tongue in cheek, just from watching that first episode. So if you didn't see it, the first episode, there are 10 contestants. They're all up and coming interior designers. They've come from all sorts of different walks of life. One's a social worker, one was in the army, one is studying architecture, one has done visual merchandising and has started doing interior design on small scale but wants to go bigger. And they are set the task of designing a show home, but they were split into two groups. So I know that not every episode is going to be about working as they did in that first episode. But just from that first episode, these are the 10 pieces of advice I would give as a commercial interior stylist for contestants. So the first one is teamwork. Because although location is really important when it comes to styling homes and what you're doing, it was really important from the get-go that the teams worked together, and they didn't. And I mean, I think they were put in a really difficult position because, you know, it's the very first episode. It's the first time they'd met. They had to work together. They'd all been told to design a room. And then they were kind of thrown into this house and told to make it work as a show home. And they want to make their mark. They want to show who they are and what their style is and be seen to be creative and fantastic at interiors. But at the same time, the brief was to style a whole home. So it's really important that they work together as a team. And as a stylist, you never work on your own. That shot you get always comes from working, whether you're working with a photographer and trying to get the shot that you see in your head and making sure that you can explain it so they can get that shot, or you're talking to a courier, making sure everything's flowing properly. It's all about teamwork. There's so many people involved in a shoot. I did a shoot a couple of weeks ago, a big commercial shoot. A friend of mine was doing the interiors and she asked me to come along and style the fashion side of it, so the interiors looked good for the fashion shoot. And there was over 40 people on one day on the shoot, and that takes a phenomenal amount of teamwork. So teamwork is key, I think. The second thing I would say is follow the brief. They got very swept up in their ideas, and there was one room in particular that, I mean, I didn't particularly like it. I think that's the whole point. Yelling at the TV at these programs is so much fun, but coming from an interiors background, you really think you know how to pull things together, and when you see someone getting it so wrong, it's quite interesting. So the brief was to do the whole home because someone's going to be buying it. It was a 5-bedroom family home in Newcastle. They were detached. They were huge. They were really big rooms. And all those different 5 contestants in one house had completely different looks, and there wasn't kind of a theme going through it or anything. They kind of lost sight of the brief. It was to make sure that their target market was being hit, and they lost that little along the way. I think they lost who their brief was, and that's like, if you're, as a stylist, asked to do a shoot for Your Home magazine, you can't go and put £1,000 sideboard in, because that's not who the market is. So they kind of lost the brief. They needed to follow it a little bit further. Number 3. Now, I think this is one of the first things I learned as a stylist. Always check the paint colour in the room that you are painting. So obviously they designed their rooms ahead of time, but one of the paint colours didn't look right. It was supposed to be grey and it looked baby blue. You never know how a paint will look in a room. It's no good choosing a paint colour in the DIY shed, because it will look different, and it will look different in the room, but it will also on different walls at different times of day. So really, if you have the luxury of time, which obviously they didn't, you need to paint a piece of paper, preferably A3, and put it on the wall. Don't paint the wall, because this is what I keep seeing everywhere. People keep painting the wall. If you have a dark green and a light green and you're not sure which one you want, if you go for the light, you are going to see not only a darker shade, you're going to have to go over it 2 or 3 times, but you're also going to get you can see where that paint line was. So just paint the paper, then you can just whip it down. And if you can do 4 and put it on 4 different walls and see how they look at different times of day, you'll know whether you like it or not. But bigger is better with that. I'm sure you guys know this already, but the contestants didn't. They didn't do that. Number 4. Unfortunately, I'm not going to give any spoilers away in case you haven't seen it yet, but one of the guys, the guy who went home, really got swept along in some of the current trends. And trends are great, but you have to be very careful how you incorporate them into a room, because trends come and go very quickly, especially when they're that specific. I'm not going to give too much away, because I think you should go and watch it. But it's really important to keep your head in the long-term room game. You might want a colour trend. You can literally change it with accessories, cushions, candles, candlesticks, vases, whatever. But if it's something as strong a theme as this guy did in this one, it's quite easy for it to be not everyone's cup of tea. Number 5, fill the room. It was quite interesting how some of them styled their rooms. They designed it, they styled it, they dressed it. But at the end of the day, 1 or 2 of them did look like empty boxes that had been painted, and they didn't feel like it was a home. It just felt like an empty room. It wasn't styled perfectly. Also, in a photo shoot, I mean, you only see what we show you. Behind the scenes, there's usually boxes and boxes. But it was like, if you were facing the feature wall, it looked great. But if you turned your back to the feature wall, there was nothing to see. It was like, think about all the elements of the whole room. Think of it as a living space, not just as a photo shoot, which I think might have been what caught this guy out. Number 6 is what Kate Watson-Smythe from Mad About the House calls the red thread. I think I love that. I don't know if there's a proper term for it, but I've been calling it that ever since I heard her say it. So the red thread is when you have one colour that runs throughout your whole home, and it's very subtle. It might be you walk into a white hallway and there's a bit of red in the carpet. You walk into the living room, there's a red picture frame. There's just something red everywhere that holds the whole of your home together. The red thread is what makes the home cohesive. And it's quite essential to do this. Now, when I heard Kate say this, I was thinking, oh, have I got a red thread? And I was thinking, yeah, grey. My whole home has grey. But actually, it's not grey at all. It's teal. And it's really interesting how I've done it without even realising it. It wasn't a conscious thing. It's just in my home at the moment, I've got a lot of grey. I've got grey floors. I've got some grey walls. But the teal has crept in accessories. It's crept in pieces of furniture. I've just painted the back of my front door a very dark teal and got a very dark teal wallpaper on that wall. And because it's the colour that I'm feeling the most at the moment, it's trickling in vases and all sorts of elements and stuff, like I'm drawn to it. So in the programme, what happened was one of the contestants bought loads of cushions and she kind of had them placed in everybody's room, and it made the whole home work. And it was a really clever trick, really clever. So the red thread is something that you should think of when you're doing a whole home. Number 7. Learn from your mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Everyone makes big mistakes. Everyone makes small mistakes. The trick is to learn from them. I have made so many mistakes in the last few years, mainly with building the website. I have learned so much about myself. I've learned what my constraints are. I've also learned that if I can't do something, I just find someone who can do it for me. So if I can't, say for example, I can't paint a very good neat line where the ceiling meets the wall, I get a decorator in to do it for me. I don't have to kind of fight that problem. I know I've made a mistake in the past. It's better to get someone else to do it. Of course, I can paint the wall, but you know what I mean. Number 8, time. I know that behind the scenes, it's very stressful on these shows. They are so time pressured. But I would just say, remember that doing things DIY or crafting always take way longer than you think they're going to. Like way longer. I can't even imagine. And they had one craftsman. So each house had one tradesman, not craftsman, one tradesman to help them with all their woodwork or their cutting, everything. Which is a bit mean for 5 rooms being done in like 2 days, I think it was. It was a crazy amount of work and they had to do their own painting. So anyway, I'm sure everyone knows that. But remember, things take longer than you think, especially when you've got to share your carpenter. Number 9, stick to the budget. Now, this is more of a personal point of view, but I just think we don't always have to buy new. It's quite a good idea to go local, go vintage, go to auctions, Facebook Marketplace, obviously eBay. But buying secondhand just means less things go into landfill. And also it gives you that really unique edge. You are going to be able to pick up something that not everybody else has had. Here, I mean buying antique mahogany, something that's a bit decorative, that when you give it an Annie Sloan lick of paint, it will look completely different. And, you know, you get something that's really dark and quite unattractive, and then you paint it grey with gold edges or whatever. You can completely change the look of a room, but have something unique. And that is always great. And it's an easier way to stick to the budget. And lastly, number 10 is stay in your own lane. Put the pedal down and be yourself. Show your style, show it strong, but just keep in mind all those other little elements. But just keep your style strong, because that, at the end of the day, is what we are going to love to watch. So I've written some show notes and I'd really urge you to go ahead and look at them. I've written a blog post and podcast on this one. So there's 2 places you can find it on Inside Stylist. And I would urge you to go and check out the contestants' Instagram posts, because when I wasn't very impressed with one of the people who was quite standing to their guns and not budging on their style, I felt like they were missing a trick and they were actually hindering that team. But when I went and looked at their Instagram account, I realised that this was their style and their ethos. And actually, if you're into that style, it's fantastic. So go check them out. I've listed all 10 contestants on the website and linked through to their Instagram account, so you can see them, follow them and support them. So head over to the website. If you want to leave a comment on Instagram or on the show notes, that would be great. I would love to know who you think is going to win or who you want to win. I've got a couple of people. I think I've got one who I want to win and I've got one who I think will win, but we will see. Anyway, let me know what you think. Are you watching it? Have you been yelling at the TV? Get in touch. I would love to hear. Okay, until next time, bye for now. Thanks for listening to the Inside Stylist podcast. You'll find all the details from today's show over on the show notes at insidestylist.com. If you enjoy the show, I'd love it if you would head on over to iTunes and rate and review it. It's the best way to help other people find the show, and I'd really appreciate it. Until next time, bye for now.